Welcome to Holdfast, Season 2, Episode 1, The Heart of a Champion. Narrated by Jake Dowsell. Holdfast is based on the stories and characters of Epoch on the Rock. To find out more, visit our Facebook page. A crowd gathered around the Earth Circle as Sophie handed out the final steps of her ritual. With the Axis Superseed defeated, and the rifts seemingly a problem of the past, all that was left to do was restore the elemental circles back to full power. Over the months, they had tried just about everything to fix them, injecting them with loads of mana, psychic and magical enchantments, even blood sacrifices. But as Sophie readied the group, it was clear it was going to take more than just a few drops of blood to fix the circles. Much more. Her tone was clear, concise, and direct, but still, her eyes held some fear in them. While walking around the circle counterclockwise, you must repeat this incant in unison. From pebble to rock, to boulder to mountain, to the land we see all around, help us to strengthen and revive. Repeat it until I tell you not to. Do not stop until I give the word. It is imperative that we get this right. Your friends' lives depend on it. In front of them, Arden Gallagher laid in the center of the dying circle, his chest bare. Among the volunteers stood the other elemental champions. Oren Warfield, champion of air. J.R. O'Shea, champion of fire. And the water champion, Asher Fairchild. Asher watched on, wide-eyed, as Sophie turned to speak quietly with her assistant. What role the champions had in this ritual was still somewhat vague. All she knew was a surgery was involved. There was very little that filled her with fear when it came to monsters and baddies, but the idea of any type of medical procedure made her palms sweat. Listening intently, she was only able to make out a few words here and there. Heart. Break. Dirt. Blood. She swallowed deeply. "It'll be okay, my dear." Oren squeezed her hand, reassuring her. "I know. I'm not nervous." Oren knew his wife better than that. With a deep breath, Sophie gave the signal. It was time to begin. As instructed, the group slowly began to walk around the circle counterclockwise and repeat the chant. Asher tried to remain focused and ignore the groans of Arden, but something caught the corner of her eye. A flicker of light. Looking for the source, she found Sophie with a clean, sharp, silver dagger held high above her head. Blood rushed from Asher's face as she plunged it down deep into Arden's chest and through his breastbone. His cries of pain broke the silence of the calm fall morning. Asher's mind feverishly tried its best to block out the horror that was unfolding in front of her, painting pictures of lush, green fields dotted with fluffy white dandelions, creeks that carved themselves through a familiar land, finding rest in crystal-clear lakes, immaculately maintained cobblestone streets with rows upon rows of perfect white houses, framed with rich, dark oaken beams. She easily recognized this place. It was her home. It was Fairlock. It had been a long time since she dared reminisce about her hometown. She tried to bury its memory, and anyone associated with it, as deeply as possible. But as Sophie ripped Arden's beating heart from his chest, she couldn't help but long for her old, simplistic life there, something she perhaps taken for granted in her youth. Back then, she had felt anxious to escape those towering walls that bordered the lands. Nothing came in, and no one, aside from the highest nobility and trained soldiers, got out. How alluring it was to imagine what was on the other side. She'd watched the birds come and go with the seasons, and ached to be like them, free to wander. Today, however, she'd do just about anything to be confined to its safety. Forget Holdfast and all the sacrifices that came with it. This place and all its people were doomed from the start. Maybe if she returned to Fairlock, they would forgive her for what she'd done that fateful night she left home. Maybe she could forgive them. It was too late for that. She pushed that thought away before it got too ugly. What in the known world had brought her here in the first place? These people were brave, even if stupidly so. She was a coward who ran from everything that troubled her. She didn't belong here. Her mind mustered up images of an old, dusty pub, somewhere along the frontier. She recognized it as one she had visited years before, a couple of months after leaving home. She sat alone, counting the last of her money, a single rock, over a flavorless bowl of soup. Winter was fast approaching, and she had no long-term plan to speak of. Already exhausted from her travels, she wouldn't be able to survive on her own much longer, and it was only a matter of time before the wanted posters caught up. Across the tavern, a group of sailors were trading stories loudly enough, perhaps purposefully, so the patrons could hear their tales of courage. She listened in on their boasting. 100-foot waves that swallowed ships, giant squids twice the size of their vessels, bountiful treasures that only they knew the location. It was obvious that there was some exaggeration in their accounts, but it was entertaining nonetheless. They laughed and spurred each other on, until an old mariner who had been sitting quietly in the corner decided to pipe in. "Ye think you're tough, young fellers, but I reckon none of ye have been to the Isle." The tavern went silent. "Just east off the shores of the Confederacy is a rock stranded in the middle of a vast and vicious sea. A series of storms opened portals to literal hell, leaving the place haunted by no less than demons. I and a group of men, 15 in total, was sent on a scouting mission by the Empire after the Great Storm. We was to take account of the damage and death toll. Within hours we had become lost. Our compasses refused us any kindness, and we wandered in circles. Madness and paranoia set in as the days passed. We could feel the eyes of something following, watching. The demons was toying with us. They was dark as night, with knives for teeth and fire for eyes. We was hunted down and picked off one by one like fleas to a spider." He knocked a wooden leg on the floor. "I was the only one to make it out alive." The sailors sheepishly finished their drinks and retired for the evening, while the rest of the patrons continued with their affairs. Asher, on the other hand, was transfixed. A secluded island with lots of privacy and monsters to fight was exactly what she was looking for. Stubborn and foolhardy, she made her way to the coasts the next morning. How arrogant she was back then, she thought to herself, as Sophie sank Arden's heart deep into the Earth Circle. How absolutely foolish it was to come here. With a little earth magic, Sophie regrew Arden's heart and stitched him up. Asher was surprised to find he was in rough shape, but alive. The color returned to his face, and he began to breathe normally. The chanting stopped, and a cheer rang out for Arden's bravery. It was over. The whole thing felt like it took hours, while simultaneously feeling like seconds. Sophie reminded the group that they still had 3 rituals to go, and there was nothing to celebrate just yet. She felt her hand being squeezed again. Oren gave her a nod of encouragement and a smile. She was still scared, but as she looked into his kind eyes, she found comfort. They had faced so many awful things together and made it through every single time. As long as he was by her side, maybe she could make it through this, too. Asher rested at the mouth of the ocean near the newly restored water circle. It was back at full power, the glowing energy surging like it hadn't in months. She, however, was still quite weak. She touched her chest to feel the scar that was left behind. Dangling in front was a chain holding a key to a newly purchased house in Applevale. Oren had surprised her the day before. As she rolled the key between her fingers, she thought again of Fairlock, the dotted hills and soft streams, her parents and her brothers. She would never see any of them again. She knew that. There was no point in trying to change the past, and perhaps it was for the best. There was something to be said about the life she had carved out for herself. Maybe she'd never truly feel like she belonged anywhere, but like the birds that came and went with the seasons, so could she. Home wasn't Fairlock, or Holdfast, or the cozy house in Applevale. It was with those who didn't make her feel so lost. It was with Oren. Still, no matter where they roamed, she knew she'd never forget Holdfast. After all, a literal part of her had laid somewhere beneath that flowing well of energy, and a pitter-patter in her chest was a reminder that Holdfast would be a part of her until her final days. "Asher!" Oren called behind her. Silhouetted in the sunset, his armor as always shining prominently. He held a surprising amount of energy for the trauma he had just experienced. "I'm gonna grab some dinner at the inn. Care to join me?" Smoke billowed from the chimney of the inn behind him. The aroma of a dish Torvalis had thoughtfully crafted traveled on the breeze. She slid the key back beneath her shirt and took one last look at the ocean for the day. As they made their way across the field, she thought to herself, "Where we go together."